amount for, again, for the all funds is $85,000 there in FY22. Also in FY22 is the annual increment. And that is also the annual increment. FY22 is retroactive to July 1st. The next item in FY22 is a $2,500 special lump sum payment that for all funds totals $109.5 million. That is going out to those 46,000 or so employees. It's prorated for part-time people. I'm going to mention here that when we pull this information out of core, that when an employee maybe is a general fund employee, but also does something with the insurance fund, and so that employee may get paid out of two funds, when you sort of do a run from core, that employee sort of counts as one employee in two different funds. So what that means is our count of 46,237 is probably a little overstated, because there are probably a few hundred or so employees that are getting paid from from more than one fund. It does not, we're not counting them twice for what we're paying them, but I just want you to know that if you sort of talk about that 46,237 full-time and part-time union employees, has a little, it's not 100% firm based on the limitations of core. Are there any questions so far?
Could you explain what the lump sum payment is?
So that is, a, it's a bonus payment, a one-time payment of the 2,500. It's one time. It's happening in FY 22. I believe it's for all employees on the state roster as of March 31st, and those employees, union employees only, will get a check for $2,500.
Thank you.
And then the following year, FY23, you see again, members are getting a 2.5% general wage increase. They're getting their annual increments on time, and then they get the second of the special lump sum payments. This time in FY23, the amount is $1,000, and the cost for that is $45.2 million. I think on that spreadsheet, that the number we put is $45,189,190. So so there you can sort of do a little math when you look further down in the spreadsheet, when you see, well, I see that he wrote there's 46,237 full-time and part-time employees. Wouldn't it just be 46,237 times 1,000? No, it would not be, because that number of employees includes part-time employees, and their lump sum payment is prorated. Any questions? Okay, in FY24, we have a 2.5% GWI. That's, as you can see in the column for 24, for all funds is $96 million. And the AI is on time in 24. The last year of this contract is FY25. There are no GWIs or AIs or any compensation for that year, because that's a wage reopener that can be opened up, I believe, after January 1, 2024. They will start to negotiate GWI and AI for fiscal year FY25. The packet you received, the next sort of, so you can see the totals here for, this is again, all funds. For the wage portion is 252 million in 22, 374 in 23, 494 and change in 24, and 505 million in 25. Below that is something called additional items. I don't have it on my up here right now, but there's a bunch of those items that I put that in Appendix A. We took that directly from OPM. We did not have the time or resources to cost out for all these different agreements, the various shift differentials, shoe allowances. There's some changes to steps, but based on what we have for our fiscal note and for the total costs compared to OPM's, we're very comfortable with their numbers for the additional items. So those are just we grabbed those numbers from OPM we added in also for the additional items directly from Yukon, Board of Regents, Judicial, and Yukon Health Center, what they estimated their costs were for the additional items. So you can see that starts at 2.4 million in 22 and goes up to 22.3 million in 25. And then underneath that, we just have the fringes, OPEB serves, the Social Security and Medicare. Now I'm going to scroll down and show you now this for the general fund. So as you can see, the general fund total wages that I gave you on this screen were $252.7 million in FY22. But when you get to the general fund, it's down to $138.2 million in 22. So it's significantly less because this is just the general fund. The lump sum for $2,500 for all funds was $109 million. For the general fund, it's $61.7 million. But the GWI, the AIs, what everybody receives in this agreement is the same. It's just, this is just the general fund. Any questions? Well, I'm sorry. Then we have on here, if you can see this, we have the voluntary, sort of down by the bottom, voluntary specialty drug discount program savings. We estimate that in it goes into effect in 23 being $17.2 million savings. That's because we did sort of not a full year savings for that, and then the annualized savings for that for all funds is 21.5. I believe OPM has on their cost sheets, they estimate that savings to be 30 million. I just think we received, I think Rob or Christina's on the call, they can speak to this in more detail, but we received a little more updated information from when OPM costed that out. So that's why you see a different number that maybe has been reported in the press or in maybe some OPM documentation that you may have seen.
Do you want me to speak to that first?
Yes, please.
Oh, sure. Okay. So we did receive information that had been presented to the Healthcare Cost Containment Committee in January, which did show the savings to be 21.5. And, you know, they provided a lot of detail to the targeted group, so that I think we felt comfortable with the cost estimate that had been provided. I mean, basically, it's automatically enrolling all employees and the non-Medicare retirees into this specialty drug program, which is called Prudent RX. And you do have the option to opt out if you fill out a form. But this will enable members And I mean, it's a very low percentage of the state workforce that actually uses the specialty drugs, because those are defined as high cost, high specialty drugs requiring complex handling. And so the members that are automatically enrolled, if you are, using a specialty drug, you would have a zero copay. And but then the company that manages it would help you or facilitate you getting the drug rebate, and that's where the savings comes in. And so we estimated to be 21.5 on an annualized basis and 17.5 in the first year.
So here in the middle of this page, hopefully on your screen, is the funding availability, where we talk about this. This has obviously been, we've gotten a lot of questions about this since this contract's been announced. And we believe there is enough funding in the RSA account to handle the FY22 and FY23 general fund costs associated with this agreement. There are a couple of caveats on that, as you can see there, and that would be that there's approximately $150 million right now in the RSA account. And if, obviously that's a big if the deficiency bill passes, and if the budget bill passes with the appropriation of 161.7 and carry forwards of 75 million, there will be enough money in the RSA to cover the general fund portions of this contract, of this agreement. And then I think I'm not sure if Neil wants to add anything, but I think we're ready to answer your questions.
I don't think I have anything to add.
I have a question. The fiscal note that you just screened through, is that? Oh, I got it. Okay, never mind. I just found it. So you're saying that the number of employees that are covered through this contract, these contracts, is 46,237 employees. Is that correct?
That's for all funds, right? So that's grabbing, everybody at the Yukon Health Center, at Yukon, the Board of Regents, Transportation Fund, the 6 appropriated funds. It's grabbing lots of people. The general fund number of full and part-time is 26,630. Yes.
Okay. So my second question is, do we have enough money in RSA to cover this?
Yes.
Can you elaborate more on that?
Well, yeah. So, I'm trying to figure out how to open up another sheet here.
Okay.
So just give me 1 second here. So
I think before getting into that, one thing to keep in mind is that RSA isn't the only source generally for any wages. The OPM will have the agencies try to utilize their budgeted PS first, and RSA fills in for any that isn't on that. So we can't exactly say that it's 98% of RSA is covered, because some of it may be covered under their available PS budgets.
So the money that was highlighted in the March letter, I think it was 105 million or so, that was lapses in the agency's budgets. Is that included in their estimations for paying for this?
No, those funds at this point of the year are probably going to lapse. I'm talking next fiscal year for costs incurred, to the extent
Okay.
that they have room to accommodate some of this. Some agencies could. Some agencies may not be able to at all and would completely rely on RSA.
Okay. And my last question, will OPM provide us with how they are planning to pay for this, or do we have to ask that of them?
Probably a good question.
Okay, so we should ask that of them. Okay, thank you. Representative Harrison. Good morning, or good afternoon.
Morning.
Good morning.
One of my question is, we have this voluntary drug discount program, and we're calculating who's voluntarily using it. How did we calculate what we feel are people who are voluntarily going to use it as opposed to opting out?
There's a pause for the cause.
I was gonna defer, is maybe Rob or Christina?
Yeah, no, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I couldn't. Yes, I mean, I think they did anticipate, because it's an opt-out, that there would be a high level of participation.
So are you assuming how, I mean, there's got to be a percentage here of people that you feel are going to opt out.
Yes, I'll have to look that up, but I thought it was more like in the 2% range.
Okay.
Because of the favorable copay. And I mean, most employees are not using specialty medications, so it wouldn't really, I don't think that it would be on your radar to opt out if you're not using them. And then maybe and then I think they're assuming that people who are using them will think that it's beneficial to have the zero copay, because those are the higher copays. But I can definitely reach out to Josh and get the exact percentage.
Thank you for that answer. I'm assuming I'm allowed a second question. So my second question is, this goes back and becomes retroactive for people who have retired and their pensions are going to be recalculated. Have we put those numbers into this summary and presentation? And do we know what that's going to cost us?
So, no, we haven't. And I would surmise that it's a very, very small, barely perceptible change into what their pension would be. I mean, if somebody's making $100,000 and they get a 2.5% GWI, the last year their salary is 102.5. I believe they take the last several years of to figure out your retirement as an average, so that $2,500 would be imperceptible and probably what your pension is, if that's what your question is.
It is, thank you. But, we always have to worry about the future benefit too. So, and, how many people are involved in this, because we know we have a cliff, and how is it going to affect potentially our actuarial calculations?
Oh, I wouldn't think at all. But you know what, you bring up an interesting thing that I should note, that this analysis is based on a roster run of March 1st. So it is capturing, it's even possible, 1,000 people in this analysis who are not going to be getting these wages in the in 23, 24, 25, because they're going to be retired. So in some ways, this analysis is a little high because of those, what's called in the 26,630 that are in the general fund. For sure, hundreds and hundreds of those people are going to be retiring on either March 30th, April 30th, May 30th, or June 30th. And so they're, somebody making $150,000 is going to come off the books, and there'll be some attrition and turnover savings when we finally rehire that person. And they will, obviously, the new employee would not be coming in at that $150,000 savings. So in a couple instances, some of these numbers are a little inflated. And we talked about it, and I wasn't really sure, candidly, how to account for that, of who would be leaving, what do they make. So I just want to point that out.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Cara Pavlak-Romano, sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm some of the numbers, or just to clarify, the lump sum payments you had said there, it was 109 million or 67. I'm not sure what.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for all funds, right, the whole universe, and scroll up, hopefully this is still sharing, the $2,500 lump sum, counting every single person, union person, and all the different funds, is in 22 for the 2,500 is 109.5 million. Along that line, the $1,000 lump sum in row 23 for the cost is $45.1 million. Of that total, representative, if I scroll down the page, right, that's the big total. Sort of the subtotal for the general fund is the $2,500 impact on the general fund is 61.7 million, and of the 1,000 on the general fund, it's 25.9.
So then where is the, I thought you said 67 somewhere. 67 or,
I think I said 61.7.
oh, 61. Okay, I see. Okay. And that, so that's covered, you said, from the RSA account for 2022 and 23?
For the general fund, yes. Yes.
Okay. The lump sums. Now, as far as, did we go over the raises yet, or the general raises, or no?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
The raises, did you, you said the lump sums were coming from the general fund, correct?
So,
Covered by the RSA.
yeah, so Neil pointed out there's obviously different ways that the administration can pay for this. There could be some funding in the, pick an agency, public health. Their budget for next year may be able to absorb some of those costs, right? Because some people are retiring for a variety of reasons. They might have some money. So OPM may say to them, how much of the GWI, of the AI, can you pay for out of your current general fund appropriation? And they may come up with a number. If that's not sufficient, by our calculations, there is enough money in RSA to cover the lump sum payments, the GWI, and the AI for FY22 and FY23.
Okay, so then what about 24?
Well, 24 and 25 are the out years and will be sort of the purview of the next biennial budget.
Okay, so, and then my last thing, just to clarify, is that, so when I'm looking at these, and I'm looking at the 23 budget, I mean, there is quite an increase from 23 to, or from 22 to 23 for much of these numbers. I mean, like a lot of them are almost doubling. Is that correct? I mean, I'm
Yeah, so let's look, I have it on the screen. Let's look at the general fund. So what we're seeing here on the top row is you're seeing the GWI of in 22 as being $45.6 million. That goes up a little bit to 47.8 in 23 because you're getting the full year cost of it in 23. So that's why that goes up by a couple $1 million. The annual increment, by the way, that was a really good question. The annual increment goes up from 30.9 to 41.5 for a couple reasons. One, an annual increment is usually paid in January or July. So some of those are not the full year. And so the 22 cost is not representative of the full year. And I was remiss in not saying this earlier. The biggest reason why 23 jumps up is in that footnote down there, and FY23 has an extra pay period in it. The normal pay period that a state employee receives per fiscal year is 26. Once every 11 years, there's a 27th payroll, and that is occurring in FY23. So that's adding a decent amount of money to FY23.
okay. I see. And then, so as far as, I guess as far as coverage though, and out years, that's, I guess, for us to figure out. Okay. And one last thing, I assume in 22 though, there was one less week, I think though. Right, because of the leap year or something, so maybe that evens out. Not sure. Okay,
And
thank you.
22 is 26 pay periods. 23 will be 27 payrolls. 24 will be 26 payrolls, and 25 will be 26 payrolls. Pay periods. Sorry.
Okay. Next, Representative Anthony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. A couple of my questions were about the increments, but you just explained that, and also the offset or onset for vacant positions. If I understand right, you said that this was based on a recent count of employees in March.
Yes, we did a roster run on March 1st.
Okay. Now, what about the vacant positions? Did it include those or just those that were filled?
This is just for, these are really good questions.
Because most,
This is based on the active roster run of warm bodies.
okay. So if we were to fill the vacant positions, how would we deal with that? You know, I know there's a lot of people leaving, but hypothetically, if we filled those positions of those leaving, and then we were pushing to push vacant positions because of the fact that, you know, a lot of vacancies are hurting our problems also.
Mm-hmm.
So how would we?
So you're gonna get one of the ways, as you guys are aware, one of the ways that the state saves money in PS and the personal services line item is how an administration manages turnover and attrition, right? That somebody retires, how soon is that job posted, how the interviews go, and then how long does it take before another person is occupying that position. So that time and space saves money. And I think it's fair to say that there's been some complaints about how DAS and OPM sort of are managing that in the recent past. There's been a bunch of bills that I've seen that come across my desk to try to address that. But so if somebody making $150,000 after 30-something years retires, and then it takes 3 months to fill that position, and that person comes in at $85,000, there will be no problem whatsoever for that new position to have gone up a little bit by an annual increment, well, actually by a general wage increase.
I think, as Chris is saying, we did a point in time estimate based on a roster. To the extent that that roster goes up or down, and to the related wages with the people who are going up or down will affect the estimate.
Okay, but I think my concern is more of pushing to fill vacancies where there are vacancies because of the need, the dire need to fill those vacancies, and those vacancies not being covered. That's what I think my concern is more of. So if we had 100 vacancies and we started pushing to fill them because of whatever problems there are that we need to fill those positions, and now we're filling them, that's not part of this agreement, or is it?
No, it's not. But I mean, so the annual increment wouldn't even impact that, because you have to be in the job and doing it for, a year to even get that. So I hear what you're saying. Frankly, I don't think it's an issue at all.
Okay.
Like, filling positions important. That's, I guess that's important, depending on. But the dollar amounts is not an issue.
And also, those positions would be budgeted in the agencies for the whole cost. You would only be concerned about the marginal cost of this contract on that one position. So the marginal increase. So I don't think it's a concern in the overall level of these numbers.
Let me just jump back for a second on Representatives Pavlik-D'Amato's question. If I'm sorry, I can't really see who's on it. If she's still on it. The other reason that 23 jumps up as I'm staring at this more took me a while to realize, but it's pretty obvious, is the other reason besides the 27th payroll that 23 is significantly higher than 22 is because the fiscal year 23 has to include the increases that the employees got in 22. So you can just sort of see by the column, there's just more numbers than column 23. So the 23 cost includes the FY22 GWI, the FY22 AI, plus the AI and GWI in FY23. So it's the sort of the, for lack of a better word, the multiplier effect, that you're carrying the cost, the increase that you gave somebody in 22 into 23.
Okay, Representative?
And if I can, what are, on the first page, you have other post-employment benefits. What, could you explain that?
I'm gonna hopefully maybe Rob, Neil, or Christina
take it. So other post-employment benefits are essentially reserves for retiree health. So a couple of CBAC agreements prior to this one, the state and CBAC agreed that the state would start reserving against those future liabilities. So employees have to pay in for 10 years into their retiree health, and the state has to also, they have to match that. So that is essentially, and it's based on the wage base. So essentially since you're increasing the wage base by these general wage increases and GWI and AIs, the state will have to essentially kick in more into the OPEB fund for increased wage base. So we factored that into, if you want to call it, the cost of these agreements.
That's why it goes up.
That's why it goes up, or yes, because you're seeing it's essentially the calculation is off of the wage base. So as the wage base goes up, the amount that the state has to contribute into the fund also goes up.
Thank you, Representative. Next,
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative France.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first question I have is I noted in the wage increases there the FY25 has a wage reopener provision. Do we have an estimate that if we assume the same general wage increase and annual increments are applied, what that number would be? Projected for FY25?
No.
Okay.
We didn't make an assumption on what any agreement would be on that.
Okay. The second question, going back to a little more depth on what Representative Walker was asking concerning the RSA account funding availability, I noticed you're very clear that you're only talking about the general fund portion covered by the RSA. How do we know that the remaining parts of the agreement in employees that are funded outside of the general fund have sufficient revenue, either with carry forward or within their existing budget, to cover these raises?
Yeah, I also did the transportation fund. There is sufficient money in the transportation fund. The Board of Regents, Yukon, the health center, they have, that's probably people on the call can answer better than me, but they have funding mechanisms from, the tuition and the workers' comp and the banking and the insurance fund are industry supported funds. Obviously I don't have them here. They're much smaller dollar amounts in the insurance and workers' comp funds. And I did not do an analysis of like the insurance or banking fund, but with their reserves and their ability to frankly increase their assessment, I believe that's how they would, if they did not have sufficient funds, that's how they would cover them.
I think that may also be a good question in the administration who oversees the use of the RSA funds.
Okay, thank you. And back to my first, could you do what an estimate would be if we assumed level in that as a wage reopener of the 2.5% plus AI for 25? What that estimate would be? Just an FYI, I understand you're not making assumptions, but if we did, what that number would look like?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
And a final question related to, I don't know if you looked at this, but what does this wage increase do to the projected unfunded liability in the pension fund in the out years? Do we know what that impact is?
We won't know until, essentially the actuaries will do an evaluation of the pension fund next year. So they will have this information that they will fold in. That being said, they do in their assumptions assume a certain amount of wage growth or salary growth. So there's some already built into their projections when they do an evaluation of both. Well, I'll just say the SERS. So they do have that. So they would possibly be tweaking some of those assumptions based on this. Given the magnitude of the fund and compared to the dollar amounts here, while there might be some increase in liability vis-a-vis their wage growth assumptions, I can't imagine it would be too large. But once again, it would be all factored into when the actuaries do the next valuation, which will be usually they start in the fall and complete it before certainly before the next budget cycle begins.
And do we know what their assumptions were and how they compare to these wage increases? Approximately the same or less, more? Do we know what those are? Do they provide that level of detail? I don't remember when the actuarial analysis, they provide that level of detail, what their assumptions are.
I might be able to find it in the valuation that's sitting on my desk. It might take me a little bit. So if there's other questions, I can come back and maybe provide you with that.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. Representative Haddad.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks for the presentation. It's helpful to run through the numbers on this stuff, obviously. I wanted to follow up, I guess, on one of Representative France's questions about who's included in the general fund estimate and who's included in the other funds estimates. I think you said there was 46,000 employees in all funds. And that number drops to, I can't remember what you said, like 20,000 and change for the general fund impact?
Yeah, 46,237. All funds, 26,630 in general fund. The most of those employees, that difference is Board of Regents, UConn, and UConn Health Center.
Right, and that's what I wanted to ask about. So are block granted funded employees in higher education included in the general fund cost estimate? We obviously have, we block grant. I mean, I don't know if they're included in as a general fund employee. That's why I'm asking the question. But clearly, we provide funding to pay those employees, but it's done through the block grant. I just want to know if the general fund cost estimate includes an accommodation, an adjustment in the block grant, perhaps, to cover the cost of the increase for those state-funded higher ed employees, as opposed to the tuition-funded employees.
Yeah, I'm looking at. I've got a lot of spreadsheets I've got to go through. I might have to get back on you on that one. I just have to figure out what tab that is. So maybe we can go on to your next question. We can circle back to that one if I can find it.
Frankly, I don't have another question. I think I think pending the answer to that, I'll be satisfied just knowing what I hope will be included is that those block granted employees have in fact been incorporated into your general fund cost estimate. But I'd like that to be confirmed. And then I mean, obviously the other funded, the employees that they fund through other revenue sources generally are not included wouldn't be included in the general fund cost estimate, but I would be interested in knowing if there's any estimate by by institution or by funding sort of agency about what those costs would be for at least for the higher ed institution.
I believe that's something we have and we can give to you.
Thank you. But the most important question, I guess, is just are the block granted employees included in your general fund cost estimate? Thank you.
Representative France, I'm doing a quick look at the evaluation of the state employees retirement fund.
Yes.
It's probably going to generate more questions, so I might have to get back to you. They've assumed, here's what they've assumed. Projected salary increases of between 3 and 11.5%. And they do have a table further on in the evaluation that essentially they've tiered it for levels of service. So the more levels of service you have, they ratchet down, it starts at like 11.5%, and then it goes down to 3 between hazardous duty and non-hazardous duty. They also have a Social Security wage base of 3.5% and a wage inflation at 3%. So those are the assumptions they have built into the projections, basically for, if you want to call it, wage and salary growth.
And those, for the recent past, the projections that the actuaries have done for the required deposit into the funds have been fully budgeted. So those, whatever those assumption dollars would be built into the underlying budget.
Right. Yeah, I mean, my back of the envelope, I'm looking at the AI, the lump sum, and general wage increase for 22 is like a 7.5% total increase affecting the retirement. I'm looking at 23, it's just over 6% in aggregate, back of the envelope calculation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any more questions from anybody on the call? Any more questions? All right. So I'm assuming we're going to go on to the other contract. Chris?
Yeah, I think we're gonna, I think Janelle's gonna walk you through that one.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Or Chris, would you mind switching to the graduate assistant contract on your screen?
Yep. Give me 1 second because I'm terrible at this.
Thank you.
Is it sharing my screen right now?
Yes, it is. I can share it if you want. I've got it
It's
up
not
too.
sharing what you want to share.
No, it's trying to, hold on a second. It's too many things open. Sorry. Okay, 1 second. How about now?
Yes, we can see it and it's the right thing.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Okay, so we're going to talk quickly about the UConn graduate assistant contract. This contract goes through fiscal year 26. You can see in the chart the expected costs. There are general wage increases. That's to the stipend that the graduate assistants receive. So it's 4% in 23, 4% in 24, 3.5% in 25, and 3% in 26. There are also some increases built into the schedule for graduate assistants who take on some tasks during the summer and during other periods between semesters. So the total earnings impact in 23 is about 2.1 million. In 24, it's 4.2, 25, 6.2, and 26, it's 7.9. I should mention there are about 2,200 graduate assistants employed at UConn who would all be affected by this contract. Then there are some other provisions of the contract that have some smaller impacts. Sorry about that. There is a waiver of what's called the matriculation fee. It's $84 a year, so that would no longer have to be paid by the graduate assistants. There is a fund for childcare expenses from which graduate assistants can seek reimbursement, and that fund would increase by $65,000. There's a little bit of health insurance savings that the university expects because there is a slight amount of increased cost sharing to the premiums that the graduate assistants pay. Chris, can you scroll down a little bit, please? And then there is a fringe benefit increase that's associated with the wage increases as well. So then you get total costs as outlined at the bottom of approximately 2.7 million at 23, and they increase in the years after that. This contract's costs would all be paid through the university itself, not through the general fund, because the university doesn't use the general fund block grant dollars in order to pay for the graduate assistants. So this is entirely on UConn itself to pay for. And I think those are the highlights. Does anybody have questions?
Are there any questions from any of the members? No. No questions? Representative Harrison.
Thank you. I have a question about their health insurance. How do they receive the health insurance through the state? Do they receive it through just where, I guess?
I believe it's through the partnership plan, but let me check and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right. I mean, the one question which you did answer is that this isn't, this estimate is funded through the University of Connecticut, so it's not something that, okay.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you. Thank you, OFA. Thank you guys for the briefing, and I'm sure that all the questions and information you gave us is going to generate more questions.
You're welcome.
And,
Anytime.
yeah, and I ask that any follow-up that you get to Susan Keene so that she can give it out to all the members, even the follow-up for Representative Haddad, it would be appreciated if you would give Susan all of the information, and that way we can all share in that. So with that, I thank you. Madam
Chair?
Madam Administrator,
Yes, ma'am.
it's your dime right now. Go ahead.
It's my intention to send the preliminary fiscal notes on both CVAC and the grad assistants today to members. That's okay?
Yes, that is.
Okay. Then that's what we'll do.
And we will be seeing everybody on Monday. At what time, Madam Administrator?
At 10 a.m.
Woohoo!
For a very full day.
Yes, we do. So I want to thank everybody. I wish everybody a happy Easter, and any other holidays that you are celebrating. And have a great weekend. And thanks for all you do. Have a great day. Thank you.